everybody. I am Emma Baltazar with One Christian Network, and we are here with James Jarvis with the Red Cross and Audrey Hart with the New Hanover Disaster Coalition. And we're here to talk about disaster preparedness. We know that during Hurricane Florence, a lot of us weren't prepared. And even though that was a horrible, horrible disaster, at least now we know more of what to expect. But with COVID, there are going to be some different preparations that need to be in place, and also different volunteer opportunities. So just want to take this time to talk about that and to get you familiar with the Red Cross and the coalition, so that in time of disaster, you know who to turn to or where to go to if you want to help out. So I'm going to let Audrey just go first and just talk about what it is that she does and what the coalition does as a whole.
Awesome. Thank you, Emma. My name is Audrey. I am lucky to be the executive director for the New Hanover Disaster Coalition. So we are working on a lot of different programs and projects and things like that. But first and foremost, we are still recovering from Hurricane Florence, and a lot of our rebuilding ministries are still working on repairing homes and getting people back into safe, secure, sound homes. So we definitely are still making a big effort on that. We also preparing for this hurricane season that we're in right now, and also responding to COVID-19. So all of those three together makes up a lot of time and a lot of effort within the coalition. But there's over 80 partners within the coalition, which means that that's how our work is able to get done. So for this hurricane season, we just had the Hurricane Preparedness Expo drive-through, and we were able to hand out 500 emergency preparedness kits. So things in there were things like a hygiene kit, cleaning supplies, gloves, and insect repellent, and different literature on knowing your zone and how to prepare your home. So if you all are interested in knowing a little bit more about how that came together, would be happy to share.
Awesome. So what if somebody wants to reach out and either find out about what was in that kit or how they can help in the future, what is the best way to contact you?
Yeah, so email is probably the best way. Audrey at newhanoverdisastercoalition.org, or going to our website. A lot of our information on being disaster ready is on our website as well, which is newhanoverdisastercoalition.org.
Awesome. I know that it is making a great impact. I'm so thankful for it. And even when Dorian came, just having those partners in place, even though we weren't as impacted in our area, but just having that platform and those relationships formed makes such a difference. And I know during COVID, it has made a difference as well, just knowing where people can find food and just supplies. I know you've been a great help for nonprofits getting like masks and things like that. So there's lots of things that are behind the scenes that people don't realize that's happening. And so I know Red Cross is one of the partners, and James Jarvis is going to share a little bit more about what it is. I know Red Cross also does a lot more than people probably realize. So I'm going to let him take it from here.
Sure. So first and foremost, we're very honored to be a member of the New Hanover Disaster Coalition and under Audrey's great leadership there. It really is important to know who your partners are and to know who they are when disasters are not bearing down on you. So that's not the time to really exchange business cards per se. So really appreciate all the great work that Audrey and her team have done since Hurricane Florence, and what they continue to do each and every day. So thank you for that. So the American Red Cross was founded on the premise of helping military families, but also responding to disasters. So that is one of the two missions that we are actually mandated by Congress to do. And so when we're responding to disasters, a lot of times that means flowing literally thousands of volunteers from all across the country to come help when a community is devastated by a disaster. Be that hurricanes, as we find very prevalent in this part of the country, tornadoes or flooding in the center of the country, the Midwest, and then out in California and other areas, they've had a really big wildfire problem recently. And so Generally speaking, in non-COVID years, we have volunteers that go all across the country to go help their fellow citizens. So this year is going to look a little different in that a lot of our volunteers are retirees, because fortunately they have the time on their hands, but that also puts them in the high risk category. So we're going to do a number of changes to make sure that the safety of our workforce, which is 94% volunteer, as well as all of the people who may end up in one of our shelters, that is of our highest priority. So I do have some slides that I'd like to share with you very briefly. So let me go ahead and do that, if I can make that happen. So can you see my slides?
Yes.
Excellent. So our mission has continued even in a disaster time frame. And so as we move forward, here's the territory that I cover. So I have 12 counties in eastern North Carolina, beginning at the South Carolina border there in Columbus and Brunswick counties, and going all the way to Carteret and Pamlico counties, and then inland to Wayne County. So that's really the triangle that I'm responsible for. Our mission has continued even during a pandemic. And as you see here, disasters, the thing that we respond to more than anything else are actually single family house fires. So whenever somebody has a house fire, the Red Cross will, the fire chief on scene will ask them, would you like to receive Red Cross assistance? And if they would, a group of volunteers will come meet with that family at 2 o'clock in the morning, standing on the curb with them, looking at what used to be their house. And we give them money for food, money for clothing. We have disaster mental health on standby to help them. We've got disaster health services, which are actually nurses that will help to try to get their medications and medical equipment replaced at no cost to them. So that has continued even in a COVID environment. We're continuing to help armed forces, our service to the armed forces program, especially for those that are coming in from other parts of the country. And if they have to be in quarantine for 2 weeks, making sure that they have the supplies to be comfortable while they're doing that. Our volunteers have actually been sewing and sending face masks to military and veteran groups as well. And then blood. Blood is one of those things that we absolutely have to have. People are still having babies. People still have emergency medical procedures they have to have. And cancer patients, where 25% of all of the blood that we collect goes, they still need their regular transfusions. People with sickle cell disease still need to have their regular transfusions. So it's incredibly important that we continue to collect blood even during a pandemic. All of our blood drives are fully CDC compliant. We've got enhanced safety protocols in place to ensure social distancing, PPE, and all of the requirements to make sure that everyone who participates in a blood drive, or if any of your churches, Emma, would like to host a blood drive, that would be incredibly helpful. So we'll talk a little bit more about that here shortly. Disaster relief, as I mentioned earlier, it is going to be slightly different this year because ultimately it's the safety of the community that we're talking about. So as you see in the image, the meals will be individually packaged. We're going to be doing a number of things to try to ensure no touch delivery of services, because we want to make sure that everybody's safe if they find themselves either in a non-congregate shelter, which would mean like a hotel or a campground with individual cabins, or if they find themselves in a congregate shelter, which I'll talk about here in just a minute. We've continued to support the community since the early days of the pandemic, supporting quarantine and isolation facilities across the country, helping provide food and supplies to hard-hit families and communities. This has been really a great thing that the New Hanover Disaster Coalition has really stepped up to the plate to help with. And that is, we've had a number of people, especially here in New Hanover County, who have tested positive for COVID or who have been suspected of being positive. And so they've had to go into isolation. So the New Hanover Disaster Coalition has been helping to make sure that those families are fed, and we sincerely appreciate that. So the disaster cycle, prepare, respond, and recover. We work with all of these agencies year round. That includes our United Way of the Cape Fear area, our educational institutions, government, emergency management, public health. When we look at opening shelters, we're coordinating with all of these different key players to make sure that we're trying to take care of everything that can be taken care of. Our blood services, as I mentioned earlier, our need for blood is constant. So, and the only way we can get those is by someone like us here on the call being able to roll up a sleeve and donate blood. We cannot manufacture blood in the lab. The only way we get it is by having someone willing to step up and help someone in their community who they may never meet get the blood, the life-saving blood that they need. And as I mentioned earlier, we check temperatures of everyone coming into a blood drive. Face masks are required. We practice social distancing. We routinely disinfect those surfaces and equipment. So it really is a great opportunity to help your community. On June 15th, we started collecting or doing tests for COVID-19 antibodies. So anyone who donates blood, platelets, or plasma with the American Red Cross will receive a COVID-19 antibodies test. So what that will tell you within 7 to 10 days is whether you've been exposed to COVID-19 and whether your body has developed antibodies to fight that virus. So why this is incredibly important is that A, it gives you the knowledge to know whether you've already been exposed to the virus, but secondarily and most importantly, it lets you know whether you may be a good potential candidate to donate convalescent plasma to help the most critically ill patients in our community. So convalescent plasma, the way that works is when someone receives it, your plasma, so Audrey's plasma, for example, if she's fully recovered from COVID-19, her plasma with those antibodies will help fight the virus to give the patient time to build up antibodies of her own to then take over. So it's incredibly important and it's life-saving, and we really need people to be willing to do so. And I'm sure Audrey would. Blood services, as I mentioned, in an effort with the FDA, we're collecting plasma from individuals who are fully recovered from COVID-19, and then we give those to treat the most seriously ill. And so far, we've already collected thousands of convalescent plasma products and distributed them, most of them in the Durham area, but we're starting to work with local hospitals here as well. So the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season, National Weather Service predicts 13 to 19 named storms. We've already had 6 with Tropical Storm Faye making landfall in New Jersey on July 10th. They're predicting 3 to 6 major hurricanes, category 3 to 5. I think Audrey and I decided none of those are coming to Wilmington, so we're good there. Really appreciate that decision. So it is going to look differently. Our shelters are going to be smaller capacity, greatly reduced capacity because of the additional space we have to give people. Non-congregate shelters, as I mentioned earlier, hotels and campgrounds will be our first option. And then shelters of last resort is what we're really going to be saying. And that is syncing with emergency management. So if your plan usually is to rely on the local municipality to provide shelter for you during a storm, you need to make other arrangements if at all possible, because we have greatly reduced capacity. So your local emergency management team is going to do everything they can to protect you and keep you safe, but they really don't have the bandwidth this year. So if you can evacuate and you can make a plan, we encourage you to do so. So these are the things you should do, and that is get a kit, make a plan, and stay informed. So the first part of that is getting a kit. And as Audrey said, they were able to distribute 500 kits recently, which is fabulous. So if you're building your own kit, there's 2 kits you should prepare this year. The first one is your stay-at-home kit. So that one, you want to have 2 weeks worth of supplies. That includes non-perishable food, water, which is actually 1 gallon per person per day. So for me, with a family of 5, that's a lot of water. So, but you want to have the water to make sure in case the water goes out. You want to have cleaning and disinfectant supplies to make sure that your home remains safe. You want to have your paper products, personal hygiene supplies, expect power to be out longer this year than what has been in previous years. And part of that is because we're going to have fewer linemen that could potentially come to the area. And oftentimes when Duke Energy, for example, when they come here, they typically bring sleeping trailers with them that the linesmen can, and we can't use those this year because of COVID. So you're going to have fewer people coming, so expect power to potentially be out longer. So that's your stay-at-home kit. Your stay-at-home kit, you should also have 30 days worth of supplies of any medications that you take. Your to-go kit is a lightweight version of your stay-at-home kit. It's roughly 3 to 7 days. And in that one, you want to have still non-perishable food, water, personal hygiene supplies, face masks for every member of your home. And I was looking for mine. I think it's over there. But you want to have face masks for every member of your family that's evacuating with you. You want to have hand sanitizer, at least 60% alcohol. If you have pets, plan to bring them with you. If it's not safe for you to stay, it's not safe for your pet. So plan to take them with you and bring anything that's going to make them feel comfortable along the way. Also, make sure to bring your pet's immunization records, because if you do have to stay in a shelter, they're going to need to see the immunization records if your pet is going into an adjacent pet shelter. Make sure to bring your important documents in a sealed, waterproof container. This is also a great time, while a lot of us are working from home, to go ahead and digitize your important documents. Go ahead and scan them now, upload them to a secure server in the cloud. So that way, if you evacuate, you have access to those documents wherever you may be. Also, a great opportunity right now is to get some video of any of your important possessions in your home, because a lot of times your insurance company is going to want to see that. So if you're at home already and you're rocking a huge stereo system, like I'm sure Audrey is, you want to make sure to go ahead and document that. So, and then bring cash, because it may be widespread power outages, ATM machines might be down. So having some cash on hand would be helpful. So that's getting a kit. Making a plan. Probably this will be the most important hurricane season ever for making a plan. And that includes knowing where you're going to go, how you're going to get there, and where you're going to stay. So you want to make sure that you're outside of the impacted area. If your planned evacuation route is to go stay with someone who's in a high-risk category, like your mom or your grandmother or grandfather, then you need to make alternate arrangements, because you don't want to bring that potential risk to them. Plan to evacuate at the earliest opportunity. So if emergency management recommends evacuating, they are doing that for your safety. So just know that, and please take that into consideration. If you're going to evacuate with pets, take a look at your route and find out whether any of those hotels are pet friendly, so you know where they are. And there's also a great resource that you can get on your phone that you can't really see because of my background. And that is, the American Red Cross has a number of free applications that you can download. The emergency app covers many hazards to include tornadoes, hurricanes, etc. The hurricane app will actually tell you, let's say you're evacuating, you're on the highway, the hotels you're finding are all full. You want to know if there's a Red Cross shelter near you. You can open your hurricane app and it'll tell you where the closest Red Cross shelter is, and if they have capacity to accept you and your family. If you have a disability or you need assistance, especially if you get routine health care, you want to check in with your healthcare provider and make a plan for how you're going to continue those treatments if you have to evacuate. So incredibly important to have that already planned and know how you're going to do that. Designate an out-of-town contact person. That's going to be the one that everyone's going to check in with. And generally speaking, text messages will go through before phone calls will, but that's not always the case. Generally speaking, text messages take less data. So that's usually your first option if you're checking in with somebody out of town, to send them a text message and let them know your status. And as I mentioned earlier, if authorities recommend evacuating, go ahead and do that. And lastly, stay informed. Know where your community is going to post important information, like when it's safe to come back. You don't want to come back too soon because the infrastructure might have been severely damaged and they're not prepared to receive you. There's not enough food resources here for you. Running water might be compromised. There could be a number of factors at play. So emergency management will tell you when it's safe to come back, but just know where that information is going to get posted. It's also a good idea to complete a contact card for every member of your family, because I know my phone has all of the information in it. And a lot of times, I remember the guy's picture. That's who I want to talk to, but I don't remember his phone number necessarily. And if I lose power, then I don't have his number. And so especially if anyone gets separated in your party, it's a good idea for everyone to have the contact numbers for everyone else. And as I mentioned, the Red Cross Emergency and Hurricane apps, all of this information I just shared, you can find at redcross.org/prepare. The last little bit, so as I mentioned earlier, sheltering in a COVID environment is going to look different this year. If we have to go to congregate shelters, there's going to be 3 areas of the shelter. There'll be a screening area that everyone, staff, volunteers, and shelter residents will have to pass through. In that area, you'll be asked whether anyone in your household currently has a fever or has any type of respiratory illness. Has anyone in your household been in close contact with anyone who's been confirmed to have had COVID-19? Or is anyone in your home a healthcare worker caring for a confirmed COVID patient? So you'll be asked those 3 questions. You'll do a temperature screening and other general health screening. And then if you fail these questions, or for whatever reason, you're symptomatic, then you'll go into what's called the isolation area of the shelter. And that's for the safety of you to have some increased monitoring to check your health and make sure that you are doing okay, but also to make sure that the general shelter population is not potentially exposed to COVID-19. So the isolation area will be staffed by public health or Red Cross health workers. They're really going to be focused on health services and monitoring. Very limited access to this area, so it'll be, not everyone is going to have access to this area, and there'll be a separate area to don and doff your personal protective equipment going in and coming out of the area. The main shelter area, we're going to have a minimum of 6 feet between cots. Families can pull their cots together as long as they don't block exits. Don't want to get into that fight. We're going to have head-to-toe alignment, so if we're in a long line, my head is there. Next to me will be Audrey's feet. And then on the other side of Audrey will be Emma's head. So that way we'll be alternating. Staggered meal times. Every meal will be in an individual sealed container, as I showed you earlier in that photo. And you're going to be required to wear masks anytime you're in the shelter. So lastly, on COVID sheltering, it's going to be very Spartan. These are going to be shelters of last resort. So the idea is going to try to be to shut them down and get you back into a better housing situation as soon as possible after a storm passes. Recognizing that safety of our workforce and the people in these shelters is our highest priority. And this is the diagram that describes how the head-to-toe alignment for the dormitory. So how you can help, we're actually recruiting 4 positions right now. Those are shelter supervisors, shelter workers, disaster health services supervisors, and disaster health services service associates. So in order to do any of these positions, you got to be a minimum of 18 years old. You're going to be willing and able to volunteer in person, willing and able to take some online or virtual training, and willing and able to wear the appropriate PPE and gloves, so face masks and gloves, anytime you're working in a shelter. The critically needed position, if you're going to be a supervisor, you got to have a minimum of 2 years supervisory experience over at least 5 people. I'm a retired Marine Corps officer, so I feel like I would meet this criteria. I think I'm going to be okay. All health services positions require active, unencumbered licenses. So those could be registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, or LPNs, LVNs, nurse practitioners, EMTs, paramedics, doctors, physicians, assistants, etc. And to sign up for any of these positions, to go to redcross.org/volunteer today. ordinarily it would be redcross.org/volunteer, but our high need positions are under volunteer today. Or you can contact me at my email there, james.jarvis3@redcross.org. So I will end my screen sharing, and here we are. So
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was so much information, very helpful. I know that general public, I think, will really appreciate, and knowing too that they can access that information on the website, because there was so much, so it would be helpful just to be able to go back. Audrey, did you have anything else to add as far as preparation, or do you feel like James covered most of it?
So I would just like to add that a lot of churches are kind of the trusted voice in the community and their congregation. So definitely share that information on how to prepare your home and everything like that with the folks that you encounter every day, and with your congregation. If your church has a plan for, if they are going to be distributing food or become a shelter, or any supplies and things like that, make sure that you also have a contingency plan for in case your faith home is damaged. So how are you going to communicate that with your congregation about the different services that you will be doing or not doing? Just things it's really helpful to be prepared ahead of time with those communications and things like that, so that your congregation knows what to expect and what not to expect as a group.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that we actually have a meeting coming up. Well, every other Friday at 11, we're using that time to communicate to the faith leaders about how they can get involved with COVID or now with the disaster. And we have a meeting coming up next Friday. So it's every second and fourth Friday at 11, but specifically the one coming up, we're going to be talking about how the faith community can volunteer or provide building space or volunteers. So James, how important is it for as pastors and faith leaders to join in that conversation?
So I think it's going to be incredibly important for us to join us on Friday, July 24th for that meeting. And I've got a very specific request for the faith-based leaders, and that is we're looking for additional shelter teams. So in normal years, if you look at Hurricane Florence, for example, we brought 7,200 volunteers from all across the country and Canada to come here and help us. We made fun of our Canadian brethren. We asked them if they, knew what it was all about, that sort of thing. And so they said, yeah, we've never heard that joke before, but anyway. But what we need now is we have the shelter teams to be able to go in as soon as the Department of Social Services or the local county is ready to turn over that shelter. We'll have shelter teams to do that. But the challenge is we have no bench depth right now because, generally speaking, the cavalry's not coming the way it has in years past. So to that end, what we're asking for churches to consider is, would they be willing to stand up a shelter team? So this would be a team of maybe 8 to 10 people. You'd have 2 shelter supervisors and 8 shelter workers or 6 shelter workers. We'll train you in everything you need to be able to do, and we'll provide everything in terms of personal protective equipment, masks, gloves, face shields, everything you need to do this safely in this environment. But what you would be is a standby shelter team in case we need you in your community. So that's what I'm hoping that our faith-based leaders will seriously consider. It would really help us out greatly to make sure that we have someone that can take over the shelter for 3 or 4 days if we need to have if we've got gaps that we can't cover. So I'd really hope that our faith-based leaders who've been doing such great work today, I saw St. Luke's is passing out vegetables right now, so love that guy. So yeah. But if our faith-based leaders would seriously consider that, it would mean a lot to us and to help your community. So thank you.
Awesome. And what is the best way to contact you, James, if people want to know more information about that?
So there's a couple of different ways. They can go to james.jarvis3 redcross.org. I'm not sure why I'm 3. I think I used to be 1 and 2 as well, but now I'm james.jarvis3 at redcross.org. Or they can call me on my cell at 910-512-8027. So happy to talk to anybody. If you want to host a blood drive, if you want to stand up a shelter team, I'm your guy. So
awesome. And I'm sure Audrey as well. There's no amount of, volunteer opportunities that they're not all booked up. Let's put it that way. I know there's help with the rebuilding with Warm and Habitat and Baptist on Mission. There's needing, there's so many needs with food. The Cape Fear Food Council has done a great job of helping communicate where food pantries are and where people can get food. So all hands on deck during COVID, during hopefully we won't, but a possible hurricane. We need your help. So we thank you again, James and Audrey, for taking the time to share with the community how people can prepare, how people can help, and how to get information just in general. So I appreciate your time, and I hope it was helpful to you all watching. And reach out to any of us if you have any questions. So thank you guys.
Thanks, man.